It was September 14th, 2017, and George was a happy and healthy 17-year-old. He played football, basketball, and baseball, and was very involved with everything he did. George was very busy all the time and always needed to be energized to be able to do the best in everything he had to do. George's mom was very strict about what she had to do to make sure he was getting the proper nutrients. Every morning, she would make him a piece of toast, a scrambled egg, and a glass of milk. This breakfast gave George the proper nutrients he needed, such as carbs, proteins, and lipids. All three of these are the three molecules that are needed to survive. Carbohydrates. They provide our body with energy. George needs plenty of energy to get through the day, so to get this energy, he eats a lot of toast, apples, and potatoes. Now for proteins. They provide our body with the materials to make hormones, muscles, fight diseases, and transport substances. Some foods that give us sources of proteins would be beans, eggs, and nuts. And finally, lipids. Lipids store energy, membranes, and waterproof coverings. Some examples of foods that give us sources of lipids would be milk, cheese, avocados, and bacon. Since George is so busy, he needs all these nutrients to start digesting and working throughout the body as soon as possible. Once George is finished eating breakfast, he's still a little drowsy and not completely awake. After about 30 minutes, the carbs have been digested and are ready to be stored or ready to provide fuel.
It takes around 30 minutes for carbs to digest because they aren't as strong of a sugar. Since carbs only take around 30 minutes to digest, if you need energy quickly, carbs are the most beneficial. Now let's move to proteins. Proteins are a stronger sugar, so they take longer to process in the digestive system. They took around 2 to 3 hours. Just to be clear, the reason proteins take longer to break down is because they have stronger bonds. Same goes for our third molecule, lipids. They take around 2 to 3 hours and normally, but not always, digest after proteins. Once again, the order of digesting goes carbs, proteins, and lipids, but sometimes proteins and lipids are switched. Now back to the story.
We had just left off after breakfast. It has now been a couple hours and George feels energized throughout this busy day. It is now September 20th and George had free time, so he decided to go on a hike. Like usual, George had his nutritious breakfast and then headed out. George was taking a pretty hard route because he wanted to get as much exercise and challenge himself. While he was walking, he started to come up upon a lot of rocks and slippery patches on the trail. He was about to turn around, but just decided to keep going. Further into the trail, George started to get confused. He didn't recognize anything around him, and it was starting to get dark. He tried to find his way back to his car, but he couldn't figure it out. His phone had lost cell service, and it was now pitch black. He was getting really worried, but decided to just stay calm and wait until the morning to try to get back. Good thing George had a full water bottle full of water. But the only food that he had was what he had hours ago for breakfast. He was getting really hungry, but he knew he just had to wait until the morning and he would be fine. It was now September 21st, the next morning, and George still couldn't find his way out and didn't have any way of getting a hold of someone. Although George was getting very hungry, the last time he had eaten was the previous morning. Since our body doesn't use all the carbs that we digest right away, some are stored. These stored carbs are called polysaccharides. A polysaccharide could also be known as the car version of a polymer. A polymer is a large molecule made up of many smaller molecules or subunits. You may also be familiar with the word monomer. A monomer is a single molecule that may combine with other similar or different types of molecules. Now you may be wondering, what does a polysaccharide have to do anything with George's case? Well, the stored carbs, also known as the polysaccharides, is what's going to help George get the nutrients he needs without digesting the carbs. Since George hasn't eaten in so long, his blood sugar has dropped tremendously. This tells the liver to release the polysaccharides and give George the energy that he needs. Since we've talked about all three molecules and what they do, here are the generalized structures of each. It has now been a full week and nobody has been able to rescue George. He has now no polysaccharides, he has headaches, he has lost a ton of weight, his hair is dry and brittle, and he's very tired. The only way George is getting by is by finding bugs or other insects that'll give him a little bit of protein. It has now been 3 weeks, and George suffers from plenty of internal problems. He has digestive issues, memory loss, high blood pressure, and even more. George sadly ends up passing away due to all of his internal problems and the lack of nutrition. Here are some steps that should be taken before malnutrition.